A janitor found a silver envelope in his locker. Inside, a mansion key and a note from a billionaire he once fed as a child. His world stopped. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. At Green Ridge Academy, everything gleamed. Marble floors polished daily, chandeliers that cost more than cars, and corridors lined with portraits of alumni in expensive frames. The students walked those halls like royalty in sneakers, their voices sharp, their laughs a little too loud. And somewhere behind them, pushing a rusted mop bucket, was Mr. Harold Green, a man no one remembered unless something spilled. Harold, 62, was bent by time and burden, not just of the job, but of years spent in silence. His gray hair peeked out from beneath a battered navy cap, and his janitor's uniform, washed so many times it had faded into something between blue and dust, clung to his thin frame. His hands were calloused, red from chemicals, the kind of hands that bore witness to decades of work no one applauded. To most, he was invisible, just part of the building, a moving mop, a creaking cart. Sometimes the kids muttered cruel things when they passed. "Must be nice to clean toilets for a living," or "I'd die before ending up like that." But Harold never flinched. He'd heard worse. He just kept moving. Except for Eli Turner. Eli wasn't like the others. At 12, he was tall for his age but hunched, as if apologizing for taking up space. His uniform was always too big, a hand-me-down from a cousin who now worked on Wall Street. He carried books like shields, reading fantasy novels through lunch, sitting alone beneath the staircase. At home, his father was a stranger who spoke in boardroom commands. His mother, a professional socialite, was more familiar with champagne galas than bedtime stories. One rainy afternoon, after Eli was kept late for dozing off in class, he sat in the hallway beside a locked door, head buried in his knees. Harold passed with his mop, paused, and looked at the boy. Really looked. He didn't ask why he was crying. He didn't speak in soothing tones. He just reached into his coat pocket and handed Eli a foil-wrapped peanut butter sandwich. "Didn't think you had dinner," he said, his voice rough like gravel, but not unkind. From that day on, the silent routine began. Sandwiches left quietly in lockers, a light bulb replaced in Eli's dorm when no one else noticed it had gone out. Once, when Eli's science fair project collapsed the night before presentations, Harold stayed after hours helping him glue the pieces back together. Harold never asked for thanks. Eli never gave his name. But when you're 12 and no one sees you, not really, one act of quiet kindness can become your whole world. The world came to know him as Eli Thomas, visionary, tech mogul, billionaire. His name headlined magazines, his keynote speeches drew standing ovations in ballrooms layered with crystal and applause. By 35, he had reshaped industries, apps, algorithms, real estate portfolios. It all bent to his will. But beneath the accolades and tailored suits, Eli carried a quiet tether to a different world, a dim hallway, the smell of disinfectant and the sound of a mop sloshing in rhythm to a janitor's slow steps. Harold Green. The name had never left him, but the world had a way of erasing the people who built its foundations. When Eli tried to trace him, he found dead ends. The school had changed administrations twice. Digitized records listed positions, not names. Former faculty had retired, moved, passed on. No one remembered the janitor who had once fixed a child's project with his own glue and patience. But Eli remembered everything. He remembered how the sandwich always came without a word, how the hallway felt less cold when Harold passed by. He remembered the way Harold called him kiddo, with no judgment in his voice, just quiet understanding, as if he knew the kind of loneliness that didn't show up in report cards. That ache followed him, through boardrooms, through jet rides, through luxury towers with glass walls and panoramic views of cities he could now purchase pieces of. Every time a reporter asked him about his mentors, he smiled politely and gave the standard list: professors, executives, colleagues. But it was a lie. The first person who ever saved him was a man with a mop. Then, on a spring morning after a speech at an elite prep academy he had helped fund, one of his many philanthropic projects, he lingered in the halls. They were polished, perfect, sterile. A boy bumped into him and didn't say sorry. A teacher offered compliments about his legacy. And then, just as he turned toward the auditorium exit, he heard it. A cough. Wet, faint, familiar. He followed the sound to a side corridor. Maintenance, janitorial access. No visitors allowed. Through the crack of the door, he saw him. Older now, back slightly more bent. But the cap, that cap, still hung low over his brow, and the eyes, when they looked up, were the same, tired, kind, and surprised all at once. Harold was still cleaning, and Eli, for the first time in years, couldn't move. Because the past wasn't gone. It had just been waiting for him. Eli stood behind tinted glass, arms folded, eyes sharp. He wasn't the boy Harold once fed peanut butter sandwiches. He was a man now, measured, strategic, capable of buying out companies before they saw him coming. But here, in this polished school hallway, he felt 12 again. Watching, waiting, testing. He didn't speak to Harold that day, or the day after. Instead, he quietly extended his stay in town. No one questioned it. When a billionaire wants to linger, doors remain open. He had his assistant pose as an academic liaison, had security discreetly provide footage. Eli wanted to see if memory had romanticized the man who once saved him in silence. The footage said no. In the lunchroom, when a tray slipped from a student's hands and spaghetti exploded across the tile, Harold appeared within seconds. He didn't flinch when the boy's friends laughed. He didn't glare, just smiled, knelt, and scooped the mess into his cart with mechanical grace. Not a word spoken, not a sigh let loose. In another clip, a girl, maybe 8 or 9, stood frozen in the hall, her laces undone. Teachers streamed by, peers too. Harold saw her, put down his mop, bent his knees, grunting a little from age, and tied her shoes with the same hands that had cleaned for decades. She beamed. He nodded once and moved on, mop squeaking faintly behind him. But it wasn't the cameras that cut Eli deepest. It was what he heard. In a meeting with the school's operations manager, Eli asked, casually, about Harold. "Harold Green?" The man scoffed, flipping through papers. "Still hanging on. Barely works. Been here longer than I've been alive. Honestly, we've discussed letting him go a few times. He's just slow." "Slow?" Eli asked, eyes narrowing. "Yeah, too old for the job now. Half the kids don't even know his name." But Eli did. He knew the name. He knew the hands that patched broken kids. The man who fed the hungry without recognition. The man who covered a spill with his own sweater, soaked it through, then kept mopping like he was born to erase other people's mistakes. The test wasn't to see if Harold had changed. It was to see if the world around him had. It hadn't. Harold was still invisible. Still quietly extraordinary. Still the kind of man the world didn't notice until it needed him. The locker room hadn't changed in 20 years. Same chipped tiles, same rust-cornered benches, same flickering bulb that buzzed like a lazy fly. Harold Green moved through it with his usual rhythm, unhurried, unnoticed. He set down his thermos, opened his dented locker, and paused. An envelope. Silver. Thick stock. Taped dead center like it wanted to be found. Harold frowned, eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his faded cap. He peeled the envelope free, his calloused fingers brushing over the embossed lettering. His name. Just that. No title. No Mr. Inside. A key. clean, polished, catching the locker light like a promise. And a note, handwritten. You once gave me what no one else could. Now it's my turn. Eli Turner. For a long time, he just stood there, reading it again and again. The mop leaning against his cart looked suddenly absurd, small, irrelevant. Harold wiped his hands on his uniform and walked out without a word. No time card, no explanation. He just followed the address. The drive took him far outside the city, through winding roads flanked by tall pines and wide skies. The estate was hard to miss. Hilltop, modern, sunlit. Glass walls and clean lines kissed by golden morning light. It looked like something from a magazine, a place he wouldn't have dared to approach, much less imagine himself part of. But at the gate, it opened. No code, no intercom, just welcome. And there, standing on the stone path in jeans and a soft gray t-shirt, was Eli. No guards, no assistant, no fanfare, just the kid, all grown up, smiling like the world had finally turned the right way. Harold stepped out, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. "I don't," he began, voice already cracking. "You do," Eli said, stepping forward, eyes shining. "This isn't too much. This is overdue." Harold stared at the house, at the man, at the boy he once fed, who now offered him a home built not out of guilt, but memory. "This isn't charity," Eli added. "You saw me before anyone else did. You gave me something I never had, dignity. I'm just returning the favor." The wind stirred around them, rustling the trees, brushing Harold's cheeks like the hands of someone long gone. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the janitor. He wasn't the helper. He wasn't the forgotten man behind the door. He was seen. He was remembered. He was finally home.